The Harding Center has attractive, affordable apartments. The Harding Center is a senior housing community open to everyone 55 years old or better. There are several apartments available at this time, and all utilities are included in the rent. The Harding Center is the former Harding Hotel. It is an historical landmark and a place that should be seen by all. The Harding Center office hours are Monday through Thursday from 8 a.m. till 4 p.m., and their phone number is 740-375-4602. The telephone number again, 740-375-4602. The Harding Center in beautiful downtown Marion. Check it out. This is Scott Spears, and I'd like to welcome you to Scott Spears Now. Tonight we're going to tackle a hot topic in the boxing world, as former world heavyweight boxing champion Mike Tyson recently announced during a press conference in which he was supposed to discuss becoming a promoter that he is a vicious alcoholic and near death. Confessionals from Iron Mike. Very interesting stuff. Who are we going to talk to in tonight's program to help sort all this out? A man who knows the boxing world better than anybody I can think of. He's a great friend of this program. He is the Dean of Boxing Journalists, former HBO broadcaster Larry Merchant. Larry and I are going to discuss the career of Iron Mike, his run-ins with him over the years, and what he thinks of this latest revelation. And will this be the end of the road for Iron Mike? Maybe the knockout, the final knockout. We're going to discuss it all with a good friend of mine, a guy I like a whole lot, Larry Merchant, right now on Scott Spears Now. This is Scott Spears, and tonight we discuss a recent confession made by legendary boxing champion Mike Tyson. Tyson revealed during a press conference on August 23rd that, and this is Tyson's words, "I'm on the verge of dying because I'm a vicious alcoholic. I've been lying to everybody else that think I was sober, but I'm not." Joining us to help sort all this out is a great friend of this program. I always enjoy when he's on, no matter what the subject matter is. He is the boxing journalist, former HBO analyst Larry Merchant. And I guess you're still with HBO, aren't you, Larry?
In a way, I've done some fights that have been telecast on HBO. I am now a gun or a fist for hire, and I do various international boxing telecasts.
As you should. Larry, I want to get into this because I don't know why this kind of shocked me and maybe shocked the world. When you heard about it, what were your first thoughts?
Well, I was surprised. I'm surprised by the whole Tyson phenomenon. Well, I guess I sort of understand it because he's has been a one-man reality show for decades now. And there's a bit of self-dramatization, and he's certainly inspired a lot of sympathy for his the public way that he's tried to analyze himself and to become a solid or more solid citizen and person. And in some way, I guess I view that admission as an extension of that. I don't know how much of it is self-dramatization. And remember, he just finished a tour doing a one-man show. But I'm sure that doctors have told him that. And maybe as a way to get his attention, to try to moderate his drinking and drugging. I don't know the facts of the matter. I'm just going off the top of my head from what I've observed about him and know about him over many years. But it was a startling admission. At the same time, he has just started a career as a promoter. So how do you mix and match all of that?
Larry, it was interesting to me personally because Mike Tyson's career is legend, fascinating. The great boxing career, the upset loss to Buster Douglas, the rape, the imprisonment. He comes out, he bites off an ear. Through all that, though, we kind of still saw Mike Tyson as kind of this, my words only, evil, troubled gentleman. But when he went up on the Broadway stage, when he was doing this tour, I think we all thought, well, maybe that's over. Maybe that's done. His interviews seemed a little bit more coherent. Maybe that's why it shocked me.
Well, he came across, I think, to anybody closely observing him over the years, as somewhere between a psychopath and a sociopath. The rules of society didn't apply to him. He was a serial groper. He was a convicted rapist. He was not always the most pleasant person to be around, although there was a kind of street wit and intelligence about him from the time I knew him back when he was still a teenager. And his reputation seems to get more and more enhanced over time. And nobody seems to care that he was, in his 4 biggest fights, he lost and he was stopped in each one. And I believe that he helped to speed up the decline of boxing and to get polite society to turn it off.
That's a heavy statement. He helped the decline of boxing. How did he do that, Larry?
Well, I just think that the casual fans who would be attracted to the big events and who are not necessarily boxing fans, but might have been sports fans or just might have been little old ladies from Dubuque who knew who the heavyweight champion of the world was and might have heard a few other celebrity names. I think that his antics helped to turn those people off. I'm not saying that he caused the end of boxing as we knew it. It was already declining from its standing as a big sport in America, as a mainstream sport. But I think that as the heavyweight champion, as the most famous or infamous personality in boxing, there came a point when people just said, this is more than I want to see or know. They might have been attracted to the train wreck that he was or that he caused in the ring, but I think they had other alternatives that seemed more appropriate to their curiosity.
I think without question, from the start of Muhammad Ali's career through the early 1980s, he was boxing. Tyson comes in not too long after Ali's decline in the early 1980s, and until his loss to Buster Douglas in early 1990, if you knew nothing else about boxing, Tyson was the name. That being said, do you agree with that?
Of course, and he was a phenomenon, a heavyweight champion in the image of Joe Frazier, Rocky Marciano, Jack Dempsey, filled with fierceness and drama.
That being said, in the pantheon of boxing, where does he go down? How good was he?
Well, basically, he wasn't as good as he had been starting at about the age of 23. And I don't think he was ever the same after he went to prison for 3 years, although he still had some successes against average type opponents. To me, he plainly was not the fighter that Holyfield was. But he was an extraordinary personality, and that type of fighter who brings thrills and excitement and drama, and who the media loves to cover, and who has highlights that are, over the top, with what we think of as prize fighting. I get the fact that he became so popular and that he got into movies, he did his own show, he did television series. He's an extraordinarily interesting person, which is why many people were interested in him, and many writers have always been fascinated by extreme boxing personalities.
I think you're right, and I think it's fascinating that, as you say, a lot of people agree that Holyfield was superior, but I believe people know Tyson far and away more.
Right. I saw an interview with Holyfield at the Olympics in London, and I imagined at that time that he could walk the streets and nobody would recognize him, where Tyson would cause a traffic jam.
Am I wrong in making the statement that, as it stands right now, if you know nothing about boxing, the names you will know are Muhammad Ali and Mike Tyson? Does it go in that order? Or is there somebody I'm missing?
Well, I think Sugar Ray Leonard was pretty good. I think Oscar De La Hoya was pretty good. I think there have been some fighters who have garnered our respect and attention. But Tyson is a phenomenon in the modern age, with the combination of becoming a very young heavyweight champion, age 20, and then the whirlwind he was in the ring, mostly against average opponents, but nevertheless he was a whirlwind, and his marriages and his law breaking and all of the rest, you couldn't take your eye or your ear away from him.
I want to ask you the question that's been asked in locker rooms all throughout the land, probably more in the 1980s than now, but Mike Tyson of 1985-86, could he have beat Muhammad Ali of 1968?
He couldn't beat Buster Douglas.
Enough said. I think that puts an exclamation mark. I want to touch on one more thing here. Mike gave another quote during that press conference, which I thought was fascinating. I want to change my life. I want to live a different life now. I want to live my life sober. I don't want to die. In an interview with the Today Show recently, he says he's at 12 days sober. Larry, is this going to happen? It's a long life of alcoholism and drugs.
Well, look, he's a human being, and you want to see him succeed in what is certainly the biggest fight of his life. He has children, he's married. Of course, you want to watch him in this battle, and he's managed to, as a new promoter, to make his battle against addictions a primetime show.
How will he do as a promoter?
It's very hard business. I don't know his involvement, whether he's the front man for some other people or not. Oscar De La Hoya is the only fighter among many fighters who have attempted it, who have been successful. And Oscar's company, Golden Boy, right now is wildly successful.
Larry, this is a hard question to ask, but I know people, I'll tell you why I asked this. During the Michael Jackson days, when he was going through his trial, I remember people on news saying, is this going to be another Elvis situation? He does not have the best people surrounding him. We hope it doesn't happen, but Larry, do you think Mike Tyson could be headed for a premature ending? Would it be shocking if it happened?
Of course it wouldn't be shocking. And listen, these super celebrity pick their own entourages. And they are responsible. And they live many lives within their life, unimaginable to us at ringside or at in our living rooms. The temptations, the dealing with all of the distractions that come with fame and people whispering in your ear and offering you and wanting a piece of you and all the rest of that. And it's like living in fast time. And unfortunately, he seems to be in that fast time, but he's no longer a performer as they were when they went prematurely. So perhaps he's got a better shot.
Larry, one final question on Mike Tyson, then I want to move on to something else. There has been rumor and myth for years that you and Mike Tyson had a falling out, that he would not let you interview him after the Douglas fight, that Don King was angry because of your criticism of him. What's the truth?
I don't remember the specifics of what happened in that fight. Of course, it was a crushing defeat, not just for him, but for King and everybody who thought that, Tyson was this unbeatable force and would in some way mark their generation. He was going to be their Ali. And of course, my job as a journalist is not to be among the cheerleaders. That said, there did come a time when he, or through his emissaries, told HBO that he didn't want me at ringside for his fights. And HBO said to him, they were offering him a staggering amount of money for a multi-fight deal, that he couldn't tell them how to do this. I can't say enough about the HBO executives who did that, because he was like a franchise, enormous ratings, enormous sign-ups for HBO at a formative period in its life. And there have been other announcers and commentators who have been fired in variations of that situation where somebody was unhappy with him, and the network had to make a decision between the bottom line and what it expected from guys who weren't the performers. And HBO said, no, you can't do that to us. And it wasn't long after that the rape trial began, and he was sent to prison. And when he came out, he wound up going to Showtime.
Do you feel personally that that was all on your shoulders, or were there other things going on? Do you think extenuating circumstances?
Yes, I do think that the people that he chose to be in his circle who were defending him most likely wanted him to show some exercise of his power. For example, I don't know that he took all those things as personally as some of his pals told him he should have, because we had a pretty good relationship over time. I don't think that Don King cared that much. He cared more about the bottom line. But if it was important to Tyson, it became important to King. So, it was a situation that I have been in the past as a journalist, in which some star athlete might not have appreciated a sentence I wrote in an 800-word column. I'm used to it, but it was very unusual for a network to stand by that, and in effect to say no one person, no matter how popular and important, can decide who we are and what we do and who we hire.
Were you ever leaned upon by the network to kiss and make up?
No.
Interesting.
And I had some other, there were other times when you take the super athletes who are rare. Oscar De La Hoya, Roy Jones, Mayweather, and who are used to total adulation. And I'm not in the adulation business. I'm in the business of giving you credit for what you do and trying to keep it in context and in expectations, and that they don't all take it with grace, and they can complain about it and be unhappy about it, but that's who I am, and I know that I'm just a guy sitting ringside and watching their movie, and that's the way I function, and I'm not surprised when stars who can be high octane act the way they do.
Speaking of guys who didn't take it well, have to ask this. September 14th, MGM Grand, Floyd Mayweather hits the ring again. Canelo Alvarez. Shane Mosley has said that Alvarez can win this fight. Larry, what's going to happen?
I think he can win. That doesn't mean I think he will win, but I think that of the opponents he's fought in recent years, Canelo probably has the best shot because he's bigger and stronger and younger, and he's smart as well as schooled in his own style. I'm as curious as the next fellow to see how it unfolds.
Larry, if Floyd loses, if Mayweather loses, what does it do to his career at his age and stage?
Prize fighters like novelists and maybe radio hosts and television hosts are not judged by what happens late in their careers. They're judged usually by what happens in their primes. And that can't change. Mayweather has had a dominant prime. And should he lose in a good fight or an exciting fight or a dramatic fight, and it was a rematch, and he came back to win, that might even enhance his reputation. That is, in boxing history, that's happened on numerous occasions where an elite prize fighter has had a tough battle and then has had to come back and prove himself or not. And so it's not just the winning and losing, it's how it happens and what happens next.
And it should be a good fight. Grab the popcorn on September the 14th. It'll be a lot of fun, I think, MGM Grand. Larry, I want to wrap up this interview talking about something socially here. This past week, we celebrated the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington. Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. A lot of speakers were there this past week. President Barack Obama, of course, gave a speech. Larry, when it comes to sports, has sports mirrored what has happened socially with the African-American athlete?
I think it is. It's been a mirror that's looked into the future. That I think, for example, Jackie Robinson coming into baseball, and who he was and how he played and the excitement he created and the sense that the playing field in sports is more level than it is in other walks of life. I think it led directly to Brown versus Board of Education, the most important Supreme Court decision that started the liberation and the advancement of black people. And there were predecessors to Robinson, like Joe Louis and Jesse Owens and Satchel Paige and so on. So, I kind of think of it in terms of black music, jazz primarily, in which we started to listen to who these invisible people were. And in the age of television, started to watch how they performed and conducted themselves. And I do think that the black athlete has advanced the cause of the racial cause that they represented.
It's interesting you mentioned Jackie Robinson. Jackie Robinson walks into baseball, which is filled with nothing but white athletes. I know it came later, but what we're talking about here, boxing, almost probably 90% of the boxers that people know, for whatever reason, Tyson, Ali, Joe Frazier, George Foreman, Mayweather, Joe Louis, there's a list as long as your arm, have been African-American boxers. Were they, you had a first-hand view of this, were they ever treated differently because of their color?
Oh, of course. It took a long time for promoters, for example, to realize that they can make money off of black prize fighters. Of course, Jack Johnson, who won the first black fighter to win a heavyweight championship 100 years ago, was such a controversial, provocative figure that when he won the championship and confirmed it in his first defense in the U.S., there were race riots. There were people who were killed. He was run out of the country. And that's what the heavyweight champion meant and how it was such an important part of the social fabric. The heavyweight champion was perceived as the most powerful man on the planet. and then, of course, it was 20 years until Joe Louis became the first black fighter who was allowed to fight again for the heavyweight championship. And Louis drew tremendous crowds, and then Henry Armstrong, Sugar Ray Robinson, and many others. But there were plenty of white fighters back in the day. Maybe you don't remember them, but black fighters started to dominate the sport. And now it's Latino fighters, especially Mexican Americans. Many different ethnic groups throughout the history of boxing have been dominant over time. But in our memory, and in the television age, and the extraordinary Muhammad Ali, who was an amazing showman, prize fighter, polarizing figure in the political and social upheavals of the 60s and 70s. So, and in the television age, so yes, we do know a few black fighters more than others. I should mention some of them from Sugar Ray Leonard, who I've mentioned to others. But there were plenty of white fighters, and now there are plenty of Mexican and Mexican American fighters who are on top.
You know, there's an interesting juxtaposition in the sports world, I believe, between Jackie Robinson and Muhammad Ali. Jackie Robinson is sort of hot right now because of the movie 42, which is a tremendous film. But Muhammad Ali, when people talk about him, when he carried the flame to the Olympics a few years ago, this was not just a boxer. This was not just a sporting person. This was a person who motivated change. Unlike Jackie Robinson, who put up with a lot of stuff and was told by Branch Rickey to get along because they expect you to be angry, Ali wore it on his sleeve what his background was.
Well, I think that look, there are different ways that athletes are perceived. Joe Louis and Jesse Owens led us to Jackie Robinson. Robinson was a college guy, an officer in the Army, and maybe he was, and I guess history proves he was the right type of guy for the right time. And Muhammad Ali came along in the television age and intuited that he could help to market himself by expressing himself openly and being funny and being provocative and sort of having the rest of us pant after him in the parade. So, you know, times change, athletes change, and some of them, like public performers in politics or show business or anything else, are able to connect to their times and to those of us who are living in those times.
Larry, was boxing, and maybe baseball's in there too, and possibly basketball, was boxing different in the fact of the civil rights struggle? As you said, the guy who had the belt was on top of the world. When a guy like Ali or Joe Louis had that belt, could the white population, even in the South that time, which was very, you know, we're still drinking from different fountains down there at this time, in many places, could they look at Joe Louis and admire him in a way they couldn't admire a Martin Luther King Jr. or a Malcolm X, a civil rights leader?
Well, he was not a threat, or as open a threat by the time he became a champion. But Joe Louis became the first black hero in America. He obviously was a hero to black people all over, but he became an American hero because of Adolf Hitler and his actions and reactions to Jesse Owens at the 36 Olympics and to the threat of a Second World War on the horizon, and then the Schmeling rematch, the Aryan supremacy beliefs and threats of Hitler. And so that Joe Louis came to represent America. And when he demolished Schmeling in the rematch, I mean, it couldn't have been a bigger political statement at that time. It engaged the world at a time when war seemed imminent, and the forces of good and the forces of evil, and Franklin Delano Roosevelt cheering Louis on, not at the fight, but before the fight, and he represented us in that moment. So Louis was a huge figure. I mean, for me personally, growing up in the 30s and 40s, almost from the time of consciousness, the two American leaders were FDR and Joe Louis. They were the champions, the president for a decade.
In 2013, Larry, we have an African-American president, but I think most people would agree there is still a little bit of, I don't even know if it's subliminal anymore, but there is racism in this country. We have not overcome completely. In the sporting world, is there still, maybe not even black-white, maybe it is toward the Latino, is there still that lingering difference because of the color of the skin or the way somebody talks or where they're from?
Well, there are all kinds of cultural differences, and every ball club now has players from the Caribbean and some black players and American players, and even an occasional Australian. And so, but the difference is that they all wear the same uniform. In boxing, which has always had a very powerful ethnic and racial attraction, people tend to root for their own kind, for the guy who comes from their hometown or their region or their state, or the guy who looks and sounds like them. It's racial or ethnic rather than racist. I'm not as connected to the whole world of sports as I used to be, but I don't hear much of that. So I'm really not the best guy to comment on it. But people I trust who cover these games and teams, I don't think there is much of that going on anymore. I think black athletes have integrated the end zones and home plate and the baskets and all of that.
In the civil rights pantheon, who is the black athlete who did the most for the cause, or changed things the most, not even meaning to?
I think Joe Louis and Jackie Robinson, who were polar opposites as personalities, because Robinson was a fiery competitor and really smart, and but who knew that to be accepted in a game with a lot of white Southerners, especially, he was going to have to run on eggshells for a while. And Joe Louis, simply by being Joe Louis, was a formidable force socially. But, you know, after that, I would say Bill Russell, one of the great athletes ever, and all the other great black athletes you can name, from Michael Jordan to others that we don't have to put names on. And the way you know they're accepted is people vote with their feet. They also vote with their dollars. And the most successful network television entity in the world is ESPN. And and the big sports are making more money than ever before, and that suggests that black athletes are accepted, and even those who still have racial or racist views understand that their teams need black athletes in order to win.
Before we get out of here, Larry, what's coming up with you? Will you be in the MGM Grand on September 14th?
I won't. I've done 3 prize fights since I left HBO internationally. 2 of them, though, were shown and happened to be shown on HBO 2. I've just reached an agreement with Top Rank to do 4 more events, one of them again from China, and I'm in a discussion with Golden Boy to do something for them. So I'm having fun. If it's a good event and it's in a good place and my calendar is free, I'm still going to be here to annoy you.
Your tuxedo is always ready to go.
My tuxedo's a little worn out, but I'm not.
We're glad to hear that. Larry, are you going to write a book? Somebody asked me that the other day. You going to write a book?
Scott, I'm asked that all the time. I've written a few books, and I know how hard it is. And if I do it, it will only be if I think I can do it right. And I'm not sure if I have the patience and diligence to do it that way, but maybe if I stop traveling around the world to do these fights, maybe I'll, in order to keep myself out of the hair of the rest of my family and off the streets, maybe I'll do a book.
I want to relay this before we get out of here, Larry. Everybody knows I love you to death and love having you on the program. I find you fascinating in so many ways. But about a month ago, and I'm glad I get a chance to tell this story, I had a gentleman who had not heard of Larry Merchant, believe it or not, had not heard of Larry Merchant. And he came in, and I said, well, you got to know who Larry Merchant is. And I played him your highlight reel from HBO when you left. And he became a fan based on that highlight reel. And the reason is, and God bless you, Larry, it's the truth, and it's the same reason I'm a fan. There are a lot of guys who do not translate through that television screen. And I don't know what it was, and nothing wrong with Jim Lampley or George Foreman. They are great guys and very employable, and I love to watch them. But I always waited to hear what you had to say, and a lot of people feel that way. It's hard to go outside yourself and look at that, but you had something, and I'm glad you're still around.
Thank you, and we've had a lot to say here.
We have had a lot. Larry, please keep coming back, and I want you to stay well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Boy, this has been an interesting conversation. You know, Mike Tyson has been around since the early 1980s, knocking people out, going to prison, coming back as a promoter, being on the Broadway stage. He's done it all, and he certainly keeps us entertained. Will this be the end of the road? I don't know. Larry has his opinions, I have mine, and we'll see what happens. I hope Mike will get better. But for now, we've got to end this episode by saying this is Scott Spears, headed for the dugout.